Cho. Oslagalapu, Hot Slahale, Hot Tudished, Hot Tutsiaya. My name is Jen Williup. I'm Swinomish. I'm a student here at NWIC. I'm in the Native Studies Leadership Program. I'm graduating this year. So this is my capstone project that I'm going to be talking about today. My parents are Pat and Linda Williup, and my grandparents are Ivan and Aggie Williup. I'm sure some of you guys may have known them from a long time ago. I have family up here too. So I was born and raised in the Skagit Valley, and my grandparents really did their best to teach me about our Swinomish ways, but they had their own reservations about everything that they taught me because of their traumatic experiences growing up. And so the education that I got from them came from this enormous place of love and protection and all of these beautiful things about our relationship, but it was also filtered. And so combined with going to public school, I was raised with a very Western education system. And so going into this project it took a long time, and I think some of you guys were here to hear our panel speakers talk about Indigenous research methodologies and paradigms. And going to school here at NWIC, I had to come to the realization of where I was at in my journey and be okay with it. And so as I came to that conclusion, it was from learning about these relationships. And it was present in all of these classes that I got to take and these conversations that I had with people. And we have these opportunities to speak with our elders, to do story sharing rather than interviews. And so these relationships just kept being reaffirmed and reinforced, and there's a lot of regrowth and a lot of this other stuff. And coupled with that was traditional plants and food sovereignty. Like, this theme kept coming up for me in all my research projects. And so with all of these things kind of combined, I realized that, our language, our traditional plants have this relationship, and they're a really great example of how important relationships are in tribal communities. So that was the beginning of this project. I used a lot of Indigenous methodologies in my research because it is by our community, learning from people in our community, and it's for our community. And so I wanted to do it the right way. I didn't want to go in and say, I think this is what we should be learning about, and I think that this is what I should be teaching someday. I was able to kind of utilize some of these methodologies of story sharing and using our language and origin stories to get a better understanding of this project. And one of the big things that I learned about was our object relations theory, which is that the focus is on the relationship rather than the object itself. So rather than spending a lot of time learning about specific traditional plants, because that would be a lifetime journey to go on, I was really looking at the relationship that we have with plants and the relationship that plants have for us. Same with language. And also, Find Deloria was like a huge impact on all of this research because of this idea of power and place equal personality. And if you guys have had an opportunity to read that book, I probably don't have to explain much. And if you haven't had the opportunity to read it, I would definitely recommend it. It's a very powerful read. But just this idea that we are the people that we are because we have come from this relationship that we have to our people, to the land, to our ancestors, to all these different relationships that we've had. And also another inspiration on this was relational accountability, which is this idea of this responsibility that we have to give back to our community, to fulfill these relationships that we have, not just with our people, but to our ancestors, to our land, to the plants. We're stewards. And it's very important. I think that it's kind of on theme with this idea of like reciprocity and respect and responsibility, which is kind of part of this symposium today. And so in studying this curriculum, I had an opportunity to talk with family members and some elders from our community. And I was realizing that it was really hard to find any kind of context to things. Like, we have this language of, Lushootseed has been recorded, and we have it in our archives, we have books, we have people who are trying to learn how to become fluent speakers within this language, but it's really hard for us to talk about the context of that language. Like, what does the word for some of these things mean, rather than just understanding what the word is. And so that's been something that I thought was really, really fun. And as soon as I started kind of looking into this, I realized that I opened up the door to a bigger project than I could ever have possibly imagined. And so I think that this was, some people talk about going down this rabbit hole, but I feel like the idea of a rabbit hole means you're going down somewhere dark by yourself and you have no idea where you're going. But for me, I think really it was a door. It was me going through this from one place to another place, and there's this whole world out there that I get to learn from. So I think that this is just kind of the beginning of a very long journey. I hope to use this curriculum eventually to teach in higher education for our students at Swinomish. So I think that, I don't know if you have the picture available for the slide that I gave you. I couldn't find an image of how I understood this, and so I painted this because I had to get it out of my head. And as I was painting it, I was just kind of organically working through it, and I realized so these are kind of all of the things that influence us. So we have these cosmic beings that are us and our ancestors here, and also the place that we come from. All of these things are shaping our language, including these plants, but also it's the things that, we're all tied together. And so we're constantly giving back to each other. We're being shaped by each other. And so I think about where we see these relationships. And so some of the things that I saw was, in plants and places, one of the examples that I saw that was really inspired by was our Kukutali Preserve. Todd was kind of briefly talking about that. So Kukutali was a place that our people would spend summers, and it means a place of the cattail mats. And cattail in Lushootseed is ulal, and it's where we went to go harvest cattail, and we also would make these cattail mats that were in our long-term, more permanent settings in the longhouse, and then we would take it and make these tents in our summer places, which was Kukutali, our summer place. We also see it in our name as Swinomish, as the people of the river and people of the salmon. We see how important salmon is to our people, it's in our name. We see this relationship in plants and language. I think about some of the ways that we describe plants, and I am not a fluent Lushootseed speaker. I'm practicing these, so please give me some lenience in this. But our hazelnut tree is apo, and it means nut tree. So not hazelnut or a specific nut, it just means nut tree. And there are other trees around the area that have their own nuts, that have their own specific names, but I was told that the hazelnut was used so frequently that it was just a very generic name. It didn't have a specific name, it was just the nuts that we use. Horsetail, bobchuds, means makes it smooth, and that was what we used a lot for our carvings, and a lot of our woodwork, we would use it to sand things down. So it describes its use. It's not just a name that we came up with. Nettle is sutsk, which means it'll sting you. But I also heard some other words for that, because the nettle plant is more than just something that's going to sting you. It's a teacher. We use it for cordage. We use it for food. It has so many different purposes. But we also see this relationship with plants and time. So another example is moon of the salmonberry, which is Pudstquad, which salmonberry is Stigwad. And that is a time where we have this lunar cycle that's telling us that the beginning of the cycle is when the salmon berries start to ripen. And it tells us all of the things that we can expect during this lunar cycle. The fish that are going to become in season, all of the berries that we're going to be harvesting. It tells us what to expect, but it also tells us the times that we have to fulfill these relationships. So I think that it's kind of this way of telling us, in this way of fulfilling relationships, it is the time, like, we think of, taking berries, right, for example. I mean, is that fulfilling a relationship by just taking a berry? Maybe not. But when we go out berry picking, we're going out with our family, and so that's a time where our elders, like my grandma, would take us out berry picking, and that was the time that she told us a lot of stories, and we built this relationship together over every summer and had these really wonderful times. And then we would also take care of the environment that the berries grew in. We would cut them back in this really respectful way so that they could grow back super healthy the next year. And so it's not just this time where we get to go out and take something, it's fulfilling yet another relationship. And also in that too, I think we learn about how plants are teachers in that way. They teach us how to be observant. They teach us how to be respectful to nature and why we're respectful. And so some of these things that I was able to kind of hear from my people and read about and discuss has really influenced this curriculum that I really want to develop, I have developed for our students to have time to have in-class lecture, talk about this kind of stuff, but then go back out to our 13 Moons community garden at Swinomish and be able to work with the plants that they get to learn about. So that involves like having our Lachute Seed speakers coming in and talking about this, having elders coming in and talking about relationships and plant knowledges, but then also having the students go out and give back to the community by, whatever it is that the community needs at the time. And I think this is super important because our students need to have place-based curriculum. And I think that kind of is relevant for all Indigenous communities, but at Swinomish, we have a very small education field. We have our NWIC site on campus, on the reservation, but that's kind of really the only formalized education system that we have. And so that's a place where a lot of our Swinomish people are going to learn about their cultural traditions in this kind of academic way to get academic credit. And so, I just think that it's really important to have this Swinomish-based education. And also for the students, it will really help them develop relationships with themselves in the class setting, and with nature when they go back out into the garden, and to speak with their elders too, learning about these plants. And I think also this curriculum will help strengthen the relationships with some of the programs like here at NWIC. We'll be working with some of our interns that are in the Native Environment Studies program, the Native Studies Leadership program, even our TGBM and CARE programs will all be able to be involved with this, as well as different programs within the community. Like I hope, people will be able to work with Todd and some other people in our departments. And also this curriculum that I'm trying to develop, I'm hoping to leave it as a living document that will be available for our tribe to use in the future. So I'm working with the education department to find a way to make this, rather than leaving it as my curriculum that I own only, or even leaving it in the archives, providing a way for our tribe to be able to have access to it at any time that this is relevant, because this information I did not come to on my own. I came to all of this understandings through my relationship with nature, with my instructors, and a lot of people from my community. And so, this is how I try to give back, because we've talked about reciprocity and how important it is to our community, and it's that relational accountability. I can't just take this and keep it to myself. It's something that, as I've gone through working through this curriculum, I've tried to figure out all of this information that I get and I write down. How will this give back to my community? How will this be available to my community? I think that is it. And I just wanted to say thanks to all of you for being here today and spending your time listening to all of us talk about the ways that we experience our world and our understandings. And Tukwisi.